Lettice Bromowski, reporter for Mail Online. So welcome back to both of you.
Hello.
Lettice, you're kicking us off this time. There's a story inside the Daily Mail that's taken your interest, and the rising sickness benefits bill and the pressure that's going to put on Rachel Reeves.
Exactly, and this is sort of what we're seeing across the board at the moment. This bill is spiralling out of control. Sickness bill at the moment is going to take up a quarter of income tax by 2030, and on a more level for everyone, that'll be £1,500 per person annually. So again, it's spiralling for just the average person, and the reality of this is we simply can't afford it right now. Currently, we spend 20% more on our disability benefits than we do on things like armed forces. And I say that because this is obviously a very big topic at the moment that we're going into, is defence spending is being increased up to 2.5%, which is likely going to be a £10 billion money that they're going to have to find from somewhere. So what they're looking at now is doing these spending cuts on things like the sickness bill, welfare benefits. The reason that Rachel Reeves is going to struggle so much with this is that it's largely not seen as a Labour policy to be doing things like this. And we're already hearing grumblings. There's a story in The Guardian today, actually, grumblings from Labour backbenchers saying there's really only so much we're going to be putting up with of you putting out these policies that are very unpalatable for them.
Yeah, because they say Labour's traditionally the party that looks after the vulnerable,
money from those who are
we're uncomfortable with it. Yeah, and I mean it's a big question, isn't it, Paul, about why the sickness bill has got so big. I mean, I think it's complex. And some of the issues are related to the pandemic, people with long COVID, people with mental health problems from there. But I think that the state of the NHS is also an issue, isn't it? There are lots of people who are waiting for operations or treatment.
I think that's exactly it. It is this complex picture, and it's the biggest problem that I think the Labour government face beyond anything else. And if they can get hold of this, then it means they're getting hold of a lot of other things. Because as you just said, it's not just that it costs a lot to help people and maintain them. And we have an obligation, I think, to look after the ill, the poorest, those in society who need a hand up. But the reason that they need this is because some other things are not being looked after. If you look to younger people who are self-diagnosing with mental health issues, and then that puts them into the system and it means they need help from benefits. If there was more money that was poured in at the start to help either with mental health diagnosis, mental health support, or to help people, young people, get into jobs, supported jobs, so they wouldn't necessarily fall into these areas, then this bill wouldn't come. So it's not just a matter of cutting it and saying it's too big. I think there has to be a proper root and branch discussion on why it's there in the first place.
Yeah, a kind of holistic approach, because people are saying as well that sometimes people suffer much more stress and anxiety if they've got no money, and if the cost of living crisis is putting pressure on. Everything is interlinked. There are so many different areas that feed into this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you were just saying, there's about 1 million people who are aged between 16 and 24 who are NEET at the moment, which is not in education or training or anything like that. And so it's those sort of figures that we've got to start figuring out, like you say, from that early stage.
Yeah, so it's a big, knotty problem. We're going to hear more about the government's plans to cut the welfare bill shortly. Now, Paul, in the last hour, I said, tell us about this story, and then I went, actually don't, you haven't got any time. So you started, I'll let you finish now. This is in The Guardian, and a story about London councils buying up properties for homeless people.
This is interesting. The Guardian analysis of data going back to 2017, and they've found that in that time, London councils have been buying up homes. They've spent 140 million to buy, they think, around 850 properties in towns out with London in order to ship out people who are homeless or, I guess, in temporary accommodation.
And are they doing that because the accommodation is cheaper outside London? That's why they're buying properties?
That's the reason it's listed here, and clearly it's cheap. I mean, we know the hothouse of London property prices, particularly in inner London, so therefore, of course it's cheaper. But the problem here is that it doesn't really deal with the problem at source. It doesn't get to the issue of why people are falling into homelessness, why the endemic poverty that's taking them there, or any of the other myriad issues. And secondly, it's not enough. You know, 140 million, you could say, well, that's a lot of money. But in London, councils are spending 114 million each month just in temporary accommodation. And that shows how difficult it is to get to this, because people in temporary accommodation isn't the traditional rough sleepers who you might see. homelessness takes on so many different facets, and particularly families who are struggling, and again it goes back to issues around benefits, who are struggling because they might be working but they can't afford rent, therefore they're falling into homelessness, councils have an obligation to look after them, and so on and so forth. So,
and you're UK editor of Big Issue, which provides a useful source of income for homeless people. So is the problem getting worse, and what do you think should be done about it?
What I think should be done about it? I mean, I'd like to come up with some simple solution. I think it has to go to the heart of what causes the poverty in the first place. If we can get to that, we as the Big Issue, obviously, every week we offer opportunity for people to make an income. They buy and they sell the magazine. And we do what we can, but we're one part of the solution. And offering people work and a positive way out is another part of it. But I think getting right back under it to say this is why people are falling into desperate poverty in the first place, that's key.
Yeah, that sort of broader picture once again, that big perspective. Take us on to the Daily Telegraph lettuce, and this is a story that's on several of the front pages. Oh, that's quite blurry. Oh, no, it doesn't look too bad, maybe it's my eyes. Anyway, this is about the latest pronouncements from President Trump about Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, exactly. And we're sort of finally, you could say, getting first signs that Trump might potentially impose some sanctions on Russia. This is actually the first time that he's spoken out against Russia. We've been hearing for weeks, and it's only really been 3 weeks that we've been in this sort of whirlwind tour of Zelensky, Putin and Trump kind of against each other. But he finally said yesterday that he may impose. I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt, because if you look at Trump's record, even with tariffs he's just put on Canada and Mexico, he steps forward, he steps back, he changes his mind literally every day. But what I think we can be seeing now is that really Trump is trying to force both these people to the table. He's really got Zelensky sort of in a stronghold here and forcing him to the table by removing his intelligence that USA used to be sharing with them, by removing that aid we're giving to Ukraine. He's forced Zelensky's hand, but now he's trying to force Russia, because really Trump is a utilitarian to the core. You know, he only cares on outcomes here, and he's in this for the USA.
Well, yes, and we got this threat of sanctions on Russia, but then a few hours later he was talking about how Ukraine was harder to deal with than Russia, and he also he said, yeah, they were harder to deal with, didn't he? And he also said that Russia was doing what anyone else would do in its bombing of Ukraine.
He's also said that Russia is bombing the hell out of Ukraine. So even within, in a moment, he can seem to have completely opposing views. I think trying to rationalise Trump's what he says, any of his statements, is going to send us down a cul-de-sac that we're going to get trapped in. I think we need to wait and see if there's going to be any positive outcome, particularly what's happening in Saudi Arabia next week, when there's supposed to be talks happening. But again, who knows if they will go ahead.
That's right, talks between Ukrainian and US officials. And obviously the minerals deal is the first step that certainly Donald Trump wants to take, and reports again in the papers today that he's looking for tougher terms on that already. So we'll wait and see. As you say, next week a big week.
Yes.
However, we have a bit of time left. We've got to talk about possibly your favourite story of the morning.
Well, I do find it interesting, yes.
This is Doner Kebabs, just to let our director know so he knows which story we're talking about. This is about the Doner Kebab pie.
The Doner Kebab pie, as you can see, this glorious concoction, has been crowned, Britain's best pie. And you may think that, well, that's not much, but there were 900 other entries. 900 other entries.
We do like a pie in this country.
And this pie,
what a win,
that comes from Boghall Butchers in West Lothian in Scotland, beat them all. Marisha Boyle, who cooked it from a request from regulars. A lot of Scottish people got in saying, stick some doner in that pie.
Need is a Doner Kebab pie.
And what she did, she put it in there. And she tweaked the recipe, she said, to perfect it. I haven't tasted it, but I would definitely go for it.
You're salivating, aren't you?
I am. Yes, I'm going to go in.
The sheer excitement of it.
We'll leave on that note. Lovely to have your company this morning. Thanks both very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Sky News get the full story first.